Herbivory is the plus-minus relationship that exists between animals that are plant eaters and the plants. So the herbivore and the plant it eats. So herbivory is really different from predation in its lethality in its lethality. So herbivores don't kill plants, but they do reduce the plant population size in the sense that they typically will reduce the overall plant size, which can affect its health and also produce its ability to produce offspring. So a larger plant is generally going to be able to produce more offspring. So again, even though they're not killing the plant, they're still impacting the plant's population. So predators and parasites do a bit of a job helping to reduce the impact of herbivory. So this is not the plants themselves, okay, but predators and parasites tend to reduce the herbivore population. And so if the herbivore population is reduced by this control, then it will also reduce the impacts on plants. So in many cases, the ecosystem may in fact be relying on a predator to do this function. And this has been one of the interesting things that has come out of research on predators in ecosystems is in many cases, you will see a rebound in plant growth when a predator is reintroduced because the predator helps reduce the herbivore population. That being said, plants do have some adaptations that help them reduce the impacts of herbivory. So for example, in some cases, plants actually thrive on being eaten. This is particularly well known with grasses. Grasses grow better when they're eaten down a little bit. Not too much, right? That's overgrazing and that's bad for them. But if they do have an herbivore browsing on them at the appropriate quantity, then the grass is healthier. And so you have this relationship, for example, between the native prairie and the bison, where the bison actually helps promote the health of the grasses in the prairie by chopping them down periodically. This is also why if you have a lawn, a bluegrass lawn, grass actually does better when it's mowed, not mowed too short. So cutting grass too short is bad for it, but when it gets the right amount of mowing, it actually increases its growth rate. So they thrive on mowing. Some plants also have a set of defenses that help discourage or slow down herbivory. So even if it's not entirely stopping the herbivory, it's just reducing it. And these are these secondary metabolites that we've talked about before. These are compounds that are produced in secondary metabolism that may provide some benefit to the organism. So for example, plants produce compounds like alkaloids, things like nicotine, morphine, cocaine, caffeine, certain phenolics like tannins and terpenoids. These compounds generally discourage herbivory because they either taste bad or are difficult to digest or have like negative effects on the herbivore, and they learn to avoid it. They also might have specific mechanical defenses like thorns or spikes that help, or spines or spikes that help slow down an herbivore. So they might also be discouraging a certain type of herbivore. So for example, if you look at a berry plant, like a blackberry, it has thorns on it just to discourage being eaten too much by, like, say, a black bear, because it prefers to be eaten by birds. So it can kind of modify the behavior of the herbivore that way. Parasitism is another plus minus. In this case, we tend to use the language of parasite and host. So the host is the one experiencing the negative impact. So a parasite feeds off of the host, but does not normally kill it outright in the way that a predator does. it's sort of more like the herbivore relationship. And the reason why is because parasites need their hosts to live, because they're usually living like on or inside of the host. And so they're kind of their gravy train, their food supply depends on that host being alive. And so you see like a really effective, the best, if you will, type of parasite for the parasite is for the host to be able to survive. So this causes the parasites to often be invisible to us. They're living all over, on all kinds of animals, on us, on our pets. We don't see them, but they're very abundant. In fact, some people suggest that parasites actually outnumber free-living species by a very large amount. And most plant and animal species at any given time are harboring a whole host of many different types of parasites. This can include bacteria, protists, insects, all kinds of different things. So I've said that parasites don't usually kill their host out and out, but they can negatively affect population. So we're saying this is a plus-minus relationship, right? And so this usually occurs by possibly reducing the effectiveness of their ability to get resources, right? So a parasite might cause an animal to have to eat more food and make it harder for it to get that food. It might affect how large its offspring get and how successful its offspring are. And so we'll take a look at an example of that now. So experimental evidence has shown that parasites can affect reproductive rates in birds. So they did an interesting experiment where they looked at nests that were either had parasites or didn't have parasites. And just as a super interesting aside, the way that they eliminate parasites from the nest is by microwaving it, which kills the parasites. And they put the nest back underneath the parents. And so what they found was that when the parasite was removed, the chicks weighed more and they were more likely to have their eggs hatch successfully. And so this suggests that while they aren't seeing chicks like die from like a specific infection, like it wasn't like the chicks were dying of the flu, you know what I mean? Like it's not a specific infection, that just the overall parasite load was collectively causing a decrease in the health and viability of their offspring. So again, this suggests an impact of the parasites, even if they're not directly a source of death of the chicks. Non-native parasites also demonstrate the ability of parasitism to have a really strong effect on organisms. So unfortunately, we have seen several introduced. Again, that means that the organisms had not had an evolutionary relationship with the parasite because they were non-native. We've seen these parasites introduced and cause, in many cases, extinction of a species. So one of the most well-known examples is the chestnut blight. The chestnut blight is a fungal parasite of chestnut trees. Chestnut blight is native to Asia. And so in Asia, Asian chestnuts have evolved defenses. But what happened was in the early 1900s, the chestnut blight fungus was transported to the United States, to North America. And the American chestnut had no evolved defenses. And so its population dramatically declined in a very short period of time. And today it's actually technically considered extinct. There are a couple of rare American chestnuts that are occasionally found in the wild, but again, they're basically considered extinct. This also has happened with elms in Europe, and elms are not entirely extinct or on their way out in North America, but they are suffering dramatically. And another parasite, the canker, eliminated the native cypress in Italy. So this is something we see over and over again, especially with imported or non-native parasites. So when we have these plus-minus relationships, right, we know that there's generally some kind of mechanism that helps protect the negatively affected organism. And so we see that in plants. Remember that they have a cutin layer in most plants. This was partially to help protect them from parasitic infection. Some plants participate in fungal mutualisms and receive the benefit of protection from parasites. Saps and resins are often to seal wounds and prevent parasitic infection. In animals, if you think about your own body, you may remember, or probably you know, that you have an immune system which has a role, or has its primary function to be protecting you from parasitic organisms, to play a role in monitoring and limiting the effect of parasites on you. There's other, when they're non-internal, our immune system doesn't operate on them, but like chimpanzees, for example, pick lice off of each other and things like that. So there's other behaviors that might affect parasite load as well.